glucocorticoid going to be in that part too. So don't forget about the thing I'm talking about. All right, and you have class after this, right? So we have to finish on time. So, okay, I can make it, yeah. And the carbofen, oh, I need to go. Okay. The carbofen have the GI ulceration, renal impairment, and hepatotoxicity. That's the three toxicity main thing you can define to use the carbofen. Meloxicam is another preferential COX-2 inhibitor. Meloxicam, the structure is the oxycam, have just the oral, yes?
I'm sorry, for this previous slide, you have a picture of someone drawing blood?
Oh, drawing blood, oh, sorry. Because they have the hepatotoxicity, and for the carbofen, we use a lot for to treatment the OA, osteoarthritis. That means we use as a chronic use, like we talk about a month or maybe years.
Oh, okay.
So you have to monitor for the liver enzyme or the liver function. You can use, you can monitor like once you, before you prescribe it as a baseline. And once you use for the 3 months, 6 months, and a year, you have to monitor for the liver function and enzyme. Thank you for reminding me about I finished that slide. Meloxicam has just only oral form. We tablet and oral suspension. We know as a Metacam. In dogs, we use the treatment for the OA and the cat for the post-operative pain. It is the popular use in exotic animal, in wildlife, and the food animal medicine. This position, they have the long half-life, around 3 or 4 days. It's good because they have like accumulation for the drug. But the thing, once you want to have the effect right away, they need the time at least 3 or 4 days to have the effect. If you want to have the emergency case to treat the pain, you have to have the loading dose for this drug. The CAS, as I mentioned, you can use to treat for the post-operative pain, but the thing can cause the renal failure in cat. So for the cat, I would prefer just one single dose only, because they have the report in the FDA announcement. They say if you use multiple dose of the meloxicam, it can cause death in cat from the renal failure. And for the dogs, as you know, I have the GI ulceration. The last class is the COX-2 selective. I have just only 3 drugs together: deloxacam, filocoxib, and robenacoxib. Deloxacib is the first coxib approved to use in animal. Approved to use just only in dogs, and to treat the OA and post-operative pain. We don't have the list of adverse effects because it's a new drugs. As you know, the new drug doesn't mean it's a safer drug. It means they don't have the report of the toxicity of used drug. What's annoying?
Sorry, it's my fault.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thought like a timer or something. Toxic approved to use dogs and horses, but the preparation is different. They have the preparation just only for the dogs, and preparation to use just only for the horses. But some people, like for example, for the horse practitioner, they use in the dog preparation to use in horses. But we don't know what mechanism to dissolve for the drug. So the pharmacokinetic fashion between these two preparations cannot be the same to use in horses. So you have to be careful. And therapeutic indication, filocoxib is an osteoarthritis. Pharmacokinetics from the filocoxib or Privicox, we know as a Privicox, in dogs has a half-life 9 hours, and horses 48 hours. That 48 hours, that means they have like time for accumulate the drug's position, but the concentration is not reached to the therapeutic concentration. Once we would like to have the effect right away, we need to have the loading dose of the horses. Robinuroxid. I'm excited for this drug because it's the first NSAID approved to use in cat. Just only drug, to approve to use in cat. In cat, they actually have the both of the cats and the dogs, but this one is approved by the FDA that you can use in cat to treatment the OA and post-operative pain. And to use the drug, you can give the once daily dosing. And they distribute very well to the information location, and once they distribute in the information site, they accumulate in that site, and they have the longer effective time in that information site. As you can see, for the COX-2 selective, I don't have the list of the adverse effect because they don't have the report. And again, it doesn't mean this drug group is safer from the old drugs. This means the report of the toxicity didn't come out, so you have to be careful to use this drug again and monitor very well. Okay, and how do we know the drug is safe or not safe? You will know from the clinical trial study and the post-market surveillance. As I mentioned earlier, the COX-1 and the COX-2 ratio is used for the screening, but it's not referred for the clinical outcome, both of the effective and the safety standpoint. But again, you have to be careful and to know which study we can rely on that. The study should be based on the clinical trial or the post-marketing surveillance. And again, for the NSAID, the same NSAID, you cannot extrapolate for across species. As an aspirin, they have like a different from the cow, they have like half hour to 3 hours, but cat 36 hours. And the phenylbutazone you can use in horse and cat, dogs, but you cannot use in cat, right? And right now for the newer drug, from the website, the one they launched the drug, they have the clinical information sheet. You have to understand it and inform to your client what the therapeutic indication and what is safety to let the client know, and they're going to monitor their pet by themselves. And once you find anything going on or the problem, once you're using the NSAID, you need to report to the FDA. The FDA, they have the website you can report. But if you're so busy, you cannot report to the FDA website. You can inform to the sales rep for that drug company, and the sales rep gonna report to the FDA again. Because we need the piece of information about the toxicity of the newer NSAID. Okay. And how we can communicate with the client, how to make it clear how they monitor all the toxicity of the NSAID. So you have to let them know what's going to happen when they have the overdose of the NSAID. They can have the GI ulceration and renal impairment, and how we can monitor from that. So all the patients, when they have the toxicity of the NSAID, they're going to decrease the food and the water intake. And when they have a GI ulceration, the first sign they're going to tell us is vomiting and diarrhea, especially for the melena. That means the blood bleeding in the stomach, and it causes diarrhea. And once this sign happens, you need to tell your client to stop using NSAID right away and contact to us immediately. And we can treat what's going on, what happened from the toxicity. Any question? It goes so fast. Yeah. Basically, for the NSAID, therapeutic indication is not that complicated. You just have three things. Pain, right? And the pain can happen from the osteoarthritis, visceral pain, or inflammation. And the two is reduce the fever and reduce the inflammation. You have to know which drug they have the more effect for three things. Any question before I go to Autacoid? Okay, no question. Okay, I'm not.
I think it's at the end of the PowerPoint.
Ah, okay, that's why. You can read it, right? Yeah. How can I remove that? But you can see it, right? Okay. Before we go to the Autacoid and their antagonists, we would like to talk the definition. What is an Autacoid? Autacoid is just generally any substance that produces any cell and have an effect for the cell surrounding that area. That's an Autacoid. That means prostaglandin is an Autacoid. Neurotransmitter is an Autacoid. But once we talk the Autacoid, most people they just refer to the histamine and serotonin stuff like that. But the Autacoid in the definition that means any substance that produces any cell and have the effect the surrounding cells. But when you compare to the hormones, you will see like a big picture. The hormones will produce specific cell. For example, beta cell in the pancreas, they produce the insulin, right? And they have the effect they have to go to the blood system and go to the target cell and have the receptor and have the effect specific cell. You can see like the two different definition. There are a lot of the Autacoid that report. You can see they have like 4 or 5 different type of Autacoid. But for today's class, we're gonna talk histamine, serotonin. Prostaglandin we just talk in the NSAID drugs already. Histamine, you can see in the endogenous histamine, is for different species, they have this different level of the histamine. For the goat and rabbit, they have the high histamine once you compare to a horse, cat, dog, and human. There are 2 storage of the histamine in the mammalian species. Actually, histamine you can be found in the plant or in the bacteria as well too. But in the mammalian cell, it's stored in the two resources, which we classify as a non-mast cell resources and a mast cell. First, we're gonna talk about non-mast cell, but we're not talking that we are gonna generate the background that the non-mast cell histamine we need to for the physiological function, especially for the GI tract. Histamine gonna bind to receptor at the parietal cell and gonna stimulate gastric acid. Or we call gastric secretagogue. We're going to learn again in the GI pharmacology. And another sort of the non-mast cell, they act as the neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. Histamine, they have the function regulate the sleep-wake cycle, immunity, learning, memory, drinking, and body temperature. You don't need to memorize all of this, but the thing I would like you to memorize is histamine as a neurotransmitter in the central nervous system have the function to increase wakefulness. And once you use an antihistamine, and that antihistamine can cross through the blood-brain barrier, gonna inhibit histamine in the central nervous system, gonna cause sedation in animals. The second source of the histamine is from the mast cell. Once we talk about the histamine, people they thought about that is from the mast cell. Mast cell basically, if in the blood circulation, we call basophil. But when they move to the connective tissue, we call the mast cell. This is a picture of the mast cell, and the purple vesicle right here is the histamine vesicle that included in the mast cell. For the non-mast cell histamine, they have the turnover rate pretty rapid because they need to maintain or regulate the function in the body. But for the mast cell histamine, they have the slower synthesis of the histamine and accumulate in the cell, but then not release it. But once any happen, stimulate to the mast cell, histamine from the mast cell gonna secrete to the connective tissue or to the blood circulation. The most cause that stimuli the mast cell secrete the histamine is the inflammation. But can be the other type like the anaphylactic shock or immunity response or some drug that respond to stimuli the secrete of histamine. And this picture is illustrate how the immunity recognize the antigen and secrete the histamine. Once you have the antigen and bind to the B cell, and B cell gonna start to recognize the antigen is an allergen or antigen. B cell gonna become the plasma cell and produce the IgE. IgE gonna bind to the cell membrane of the mast cell or basophil. Gonna stay like that. And once the patient or animal exposed to the antigen or allergen for the second time or third time, IgE on the cell membrane of the mast cell gonna recognize as an allergen for that and gonna secrete a lot of histamine. Histamine, they have the serious effect, which is the bronchoconstriction and increased permeability of the blood vessel. Gonna cause a swelling and redness and heart and inflammation. But the serious problem is the bronchoconstriction because the animal cannot breathe. And that we call the anaphylactic shock. And that once the have the increased permeability and cause the inflammation, cell gonna release all the icosanoid and have more inflammation and recruit more cell. It happen. So I mentioned that means once they have the anaphylactic of anaphylactic shock, antihistamine is not the good drug to treat because once they have that going on, it causes a serious problem. And it's not only histamine that cause inflammation. They have other icosanoid or autacoid that cause the inflammation. But once you use the antihistamine, they're just blocking histamine. They still have the function for that, especially for the bronchoconstriction or inflammation. This is a list that causes anaphylactic shock. I pull out from the human and for the veterinary field. So the thing we will find is a vaccine. You can see like they have the vaccine, they have the anaphylactic shock in animals. And the other thing is the clinical sign of the anaphylactic shock is different from the species. In a human, you will find like they cannot breathe because of bronchoconstriction, right? And have a running nose or the secretion. But for the dogs, when they have the anaphylactic shock for the vaccine, they have more in clinical sign of the GI tract. They have a vomiting, diarrhea, but still have a bronchoconstriction. So you cannot use the clinical sign of the anaphylactic shock and extrapolate to the all species. I like this slide because this slide is the illustrate you what is the cause that release of the histamine. The one we talk a lot about the anaphylactic shock is from the IgE, right? And IgE recognize the allergen or the antigen, and that release the histamine. Because I have the IgE right here and recognize for the antigen and release the histamine. And have you heard anaphylactoid reaction?